Hello everybody, welcome. Always takes me a minute to get up and running. Please have some patience. It's worth watching. I'm Dana. Hope you're doing well. And you can call in at 709-589-4406. We're good to go. And a big show for everybody tonight. Got a big show for everybody. It's might be too much to get in to finish in one show. You can call into these live shows. All the lines are currently open. And you can call in anytime during the show. Particularly if you're pro-nuclear. Yepper. Here we go. Strap yourselves in and hang on tight. So we got a news cycle of die-offs. It's a lot of whales. A lot of different whales. Like a lot. And birds and insects and all kinds of species. And we can't get to it all. So most likely tomorrow night we'll get to the rest of it. Now this particular folder started at the end of September, or the beginning of September, I think it was the first week of September of last year. And we just kept piling it into the folder. We never went past the due date of doing the show, and now we got a big mess on our hands. And it always takes me a minute, so that doesn't mean you shouldn't join the show right away. It just means it always takes a minute. So the nuclear industry is pretty crazy people. We see so many examples of the lies that they tell. It's really special. They're desperate that you can't appreciate it. So they've been describing radioactive fallout, for instance, for 80 years of being equal to potassium in a banana, which of course is simply not true. Anthropogenic man-made radiation gets into the body of any species or humans. The body doesn't know what it is, so it attacks it with white blood cells for the rest of their lives. Eventually builds a sarcophagus around it. We call it a tumor. But the nuances of that are much, much more greater. But that's the logistic of the difference between potassium and bananas. And so this story we done recently, British nuclear test in Australia still haunts the local communities decades later. And there was this statement of some have created a plutonium-radium-carbon compound that would be destroyed quickly in the presence of air. First off, plutonium-radium compounds are not worried about air at all. The uranium got 1 million to billion of year half-lives, and there's 10 half-lives. And plutonium is, depending on which one it is, say it's 239, is 24,000 years. And you usually get 3 tumors from plutonium. The skeleton, the lung, and the liver. And the majority of people will die and animals and insects will die from the skeleton. But think about that statement, would be destroyed quickly in the presence of air. It's just one of thousands and thousands of examples we have of this industry and its perpetual lies to confuse and to completely leave people incapable of appreciating. So we're not going to go down that technical road tonight. We got way too many stories. We're just going to walk through these stories, and ultimately you're going to see this consensus of emaciated animals, and this is symmetrical worldwide. And we have a poll tonight just to... Now we've been doing this poll for a while, this type of poll, for the last few weeks. Is radioactive fallout behind an extinction level event that we're looking at? Mass species die off worldwide post Fukushima nuclear meltdowns. And what we're talking about there is the perpetual radioactive fallout from the nuclear meltdowns that cover the entire planet and oceans in a very short period of time. In a very short period of time. This model was a German model based on the ocean's dispersal over 6 years. Now, it's only based on a very fraction of the inventories from each of the 4 reactor buildings. These were massive buildings. This is another model. This one's based on 26 days of airborne radioactive fallout. So the airborne radioactive fallout would have contaminated the ocean in 26 days, not in 6 years. But even at 6 years, it's still quite frightening. But the reality of it is, the majority, if not all of them, are showing that particular type of scale, dispersal. And it's not based upon the explosions, the loss of the inventories. It's basically, most of the models are based on venting. So here we go. Don't forget to give us a like on the video, subscribe, and share. Good one, James. James realized he misspelled Maralinga. Yeah, because you don't want people looking it up, right? That's a great one. I missed that one, which is surprising for me. But awesome. Sea life, which reminds me, because we're on the topic of deception, right? How suggesting that plutonium uranium compounds, which they're talking about the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs, they'll be here long after every species is gone, looking for something to show up so they can kill it. Oh yeah, so James had sent me a screen capture. He does this once in a while where he'll get into a conversation. He's not rude like me. I'm pretty rude when it comes to the pro-nuclear community. James Lucid in the comment section was trying to have a debate with him. And they came back with you must be from the coal lobby. All nuclear power plants, by the way, are using coal to power their nuclear power plants. They can't run on their own energy, which James had told him. And they just denied it. He came back and slurred him that he must be funded by the coal industry. That's why he doesn't like nuclear. He doesn't like nuclear for all the right reasons. Same majority of the people that would show up at these streams. Sea lion dies in Klopp Lake, ending an unusual excursion. Unusual excursion. California sea lions, which is typically California golden sea lions, can be seen at Humboldt Bay, British Columbia, and everywhere else. This is the first sighting of one in Arcata Marsh. Goalie, who lives in the area since 1996, over 20 years, or 30 years, said she's never seen or heard of a report of a sea lion crossing the trail from the bay into Cope Lake. Now, we've seen a lot of examples. Just in a 1 year period, we've seen a whole bunch of whales show up way up freshwater rivers. And we had one there, I think it was the same year, showed up in Montreal Harbour, which is so far interior Canada. They've never seen a whale. Because these shows are complicated, for me, not for you, unfortunately. Fortunately, they're very complicated for me because I gotta be very careful of how I phrase everything, because that's important to the future of everything and every species. Said she never seen or heard of a report of a sea lion. Never heard of it. So after 30 years, she's never heard of it. And what we know, he's got a skin disease, you can see. What we know is they're looking for food, or they're just trying to get it away from the ocean because it's hypoxia, a lack of oxygen due to the radioactive fallout destroying the phytoplankton, which is the basis of the food chain, the basis of the oxygen chain, and the basis of the carbon sequestering chain. Through my telephoto lens in a misty fog, it looked like the side of a sea lion. A visible, sadly confirmed it was the same sea lion corpse. Just for more of the deception of this industry, this insane nuclear industry. This is just a fraction I made. That's ABC Australia, Cecilia Vega, CNN, BBC Rupert Winfield Hayes, CBS Seth Dorn. As the senators, and all of them are pretending they're at the top of Fukushima Reactor 4, which was 190 feet tall. It had decades of reactor cores at the very top of the buildings. And they're pretending they're at the top of the buildings in 2013. That's when I made that particular picture. They're pretending they're at the top of that building, getting TEPCO, watching TEPCO get the fuel out of a pool. And the reason is because Fukushima radioactive fallout is an extinction event. And this is some of the depths they're willing to go to cover it up. Now, there are, these stories, I gather these stories up. That doesn't mean every single one died as a direct result of radiation. But it very well could be, and it most likely is. And that's why we are talking about these particular stories. This model of the radioactive fallout is only based on 16 days. This is the French government. And people can deny all the information all they want, but that's all they're doing. They're denying it. It's the real deal. They're actually on top of the buildings. I can play the video if you want. Maybe later I'll just do it for badness. Amazing pictures of dead mountain lion with teeth growing from his head. I thought that was an interesting story. And what happens from radioactive fallout is congenital malformations, and you see that symmetrically throughout Ukraine and Belarus after Chernobyl and Europe. And you'll see it now worldwide post-Fukushima. Animal was killed legally when it was dead by a hunter in Idaho, United States. Another theory is that the strange growth is a tumor. That it's a tumor. Absolutely. Just like the nuclear industry is a tumor on humanity and the species. Wildlife officials says they have never seen a congenital malformation like this before. After Fukushima, the rate of thyroid cancers in children in Japan went from 1 in a million to 358,000 out of a million, 35.8%. It used to be 1 in a million. So 1 in a million, and they'd done a study on 38,000 children. They had 13,646 children. And the thyroid glands of a child is only around 2 centimeters. A single atom is in your body. Your body attacks it for the rest of your life. And every second it's exploding almost at the speed of light. And what that does is it destroys the chromosomes, the DNAs, the cells, the sperms, and everything else. And your body has to try to repair that every second. It can't do it. And because you're talking about cesium will explode 600 feet every second in every direction. And so when you're in a nuclear wasteland, you're breathing it, you expect to see outrageous numbers, right? There was 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. In 2019, a study of congenital malformation heart disease for children, neonates, and infants, newborns, that survived was 14.2% per 100,000 neonates and infants needed open heart surgery to correct congenital malformation that would show up. You can look up Chernobyl Hearts. It's a documentary. It's a pretty tough documentary to watch, but it's certainly a good one. It's a documentary that shows open heart surgeries on children in Belarus, Ukraine, and due to Chernobyl radioactive fallout. Most of these were abandoned children. It's quite disturbing. But it's a foundation in the United Kingdom that has provided over 6,500 children with open heart surgery by paying for that, right? To help them get some relief, even though they're abandoned and they live in absolute squalor. There are some really good people on this planet, some amazing souls on this planet. So the thyroid glands, I'm just trying to set up before we start steamrolling through all this. The thyroid gland, once it's saturated with this type of radiation, it's producing radioactive hormones for the rest of their lives. And because we're talking about so much, you can't just have, and iodine is a gamma, you can't have just gammas. You're going to have alphas and neutrons and betas and gamma and X-rays. And X-rays is caused by alphas, neutrons, betas, and gammas exploding at the speed of light every second. And the energy hits each other. They don't mingle. They hit each other and they break. It's what's known as a breaking effect, a Bromson lung effect. I probably butchered it. It's a German name. I probably butchered it, but... And so what happens is when you're talking about this much radiation, it also means that the animals, the birds, the insects, not just humans, are also going to be dealing with not just permanent mutated hormones. They're going to be producing radioactive mutated hormones, which regulates every function of their body. You know this is going to go so, particularly to the more vulnerable species like insects and birds and animals and everything else. And it's the basis of the food chain is the most vulnerable. And we've seen that broken now. But what it means is they're going to be producing radioactive, not just radioactive hormones for the rest of life in every species. We're talking about that post-Fukushima. We're going to see that true for stem cells. So you're going to see radioactive stem cells. So you got radioactive, for the developing animals and insects and children and everything else, stem cells and hormones are the most important development facet of their development, right? Here we go. Let's go. Let's go, baby. The race to find out what killed hundreds of pink dolphins in the Amazon. Trying to establish why the global heating. This is an interesting word, global heating. Now, this is a word you can trace back to the post-Fukushima. Used the deaths of a rare river dolphin last year before temperatures start to rise again. Temperatures are over 100 degrees in the Amazon River because the glacier disappeared post-Fukushima, like a lot of glaciers worldwide. And because these are in different stages of decomposition, it's hard to appreciate what we're talking about. Now, this one is alive. These two. And typically, you're looking for a peanut head as your first signs of emaciation. We'll talk about that a little bit coming up later. So what's going on is the river is not regulated by the cold water from the glaciers anymore. They're not going to tell you that here, but that's generally what's going on with it. And we're seeing that symmetrical throughout North America in particular. And so there's incredible effects from radiation. Radiation kills the bacteria, the fungus in the biosphere, in the ecosystem rather, in your forests and your meadows and your continents. And what happens there is, if without the fungus and the bacteria, because we know this from Chernobyl, we know this many other ways too, is the biota, the microscopic animals, don't break down the foliage and the litter anymore. And so now the earth is drying out because it's not drying. You don't have the fungus, you don't have the biota, you don't have the foliage and everything breaking down. And now everything is what I best describe as tinder dry. We'll talk about that more later. Mutated baby birds with 2 heads, 3 beaks. Mutated plants, Fukushima in the United States and Canada. If you're actually looking, you will find just overwhelming amount of this types of stuff. Mutations. And Organic Slant is almost specialized in this particular topic for radioactive fallout. So here's how that works. They know that say your food source. We'll talk about food source, but then you can flip that to our food source is the same food source for all species, not just us, right? And so anything that can happen to grapevines, we know how all these. I just got a bunch of studies that'll show you how the academic world understands that plants uptake radiation immediately and can be used as a way of finding radiation in an environment. So we know grapevines will suck up radiation, strawberries will suck up the radiation. Accumulation of radiation by plants is a monitor system. So they're acknowledging that your food source and the food source and the plants are so important to all the species. Foliage and root uptake of cesium, strontium, zirconium in tomato plants. So they're very aware, and they got millions of these types of studies, by the way. So there's no way they can plead that they're naive or anything. Experimentally determined translocation of cesium in potatoes. Cesium, strontium 85, and it's really interesting to use the strontium 85 because strontium has only got a few year half-life, whereas strontium 90 has a 30-year half-life. And where you're going to find strontium 85, and cesium-134 is another interesting one, because you can't have cesium-134 without cesium-137, which is pulsing energy 600 feet every second. You can't have strontium-85 without strontium-90. For every cesium-137, because you can't have 134 without 137. 137 produced in a bigger ratio than the 134. For every 137 cesium, there's 100 times more strontium-90. But they couldn't probably get money to do the strontium-90 and the cesium-137, but they were able to get money to do 134 or 85, or they're just part of that industry. Now, I just want to address a few things. I know people say there's a lot of good scientists out there, and it depends on what your version of good is. Is the scientist who knows what's going on and remains silent a good scientist? Still a good scientist? No. So that excludes the typical scientist, right? That refuse to speak out about the radiation or even to put it into the equation. It's very dishonest not to do it. And so they know how radiation is sucked up in wheat, and wheat, of course, is a staple. Where's most of our wheat on the planet coming from? It's coming from Ukraine, which was heavily contaminated after Chernobyl. And that contamination was never go away. And we've done major presentations on Belarus, Ukraine, and Chernobyl, particularly the anniversary shows. Japan shows first commercial fin whale catch in 48 years. That one, if that's the picture of the first one, that one's not looking very healthy. Now, fin whales are typically fairly streamlined compared to some whales, right? But you can almost see the peanut head on that one. Japan's main whaling company has released images showing the first fin whale was caught commercially by his fleet in almost 50 years before it was butchered and sent home for consumption. And what they do with the big whales like this is they'll hang them upside down alongside the boat until they drown. And so they'll thrash because they can hold their breaths for, maybe a half an hour. So they'll do their death thrash for a half an hour, right alongside the whaling boat before they finally die. And Japan has done enough harm to our planet. They shouldn't be out prematurely killing the whales. You could call it a mercy killing because of the radiation for some of them, but as you'll see. I gotta try to remember to turn this I wanted a super hot drink just to cut my throat. And I gotta remember to turn down my audio rather than sipping. My apologies. This is the first fin whale catch in Japanese commercial whaling since 1976, almost half a century. The male whale, which was harpooned and killed by a smaller vessel on August the 1st, was 64 feet long, weighed at least, my head out of the way, 55 tons. And 4 more have been caught since. I can't remember if that's a good tonnage or not. Well, 64 feet, I guess that's good. Because normally I have those statistics. I didn't get at that particular time. My apologies. Of what should be a healthy weight for a whale this size. Neptunium-239 dispersion, North America. This data includes dispersion models of plutonium-239 and neptunium-239. And the dispersion plots are developed with TEPCO's total release evaluation. But the total inventories that they acknowledge is just a fraction of the actual inventories that we're aware of. Just let me explain that as quick as I can. I have one single picture that would hopefully, not hopefully, but would articulate that, but because I've been at this for too long. I have too much. So first off, the inventories of reactor 4, which is P to your left, is not included in the inventories that is in the model. And we're almost... Let's keep going anyway. I'm never going to get through the show if I don't keep going. We're not going to get through it tonight. I'm pretty certain about that. By the way, at the end of October, almost the end of 2023, 10 billion snow crab had vanished off Alaska. That was 4 times more than the entire inventory of snow crabs that have been caught off Alaska. In other words, the industry flatlined. And where does a lot of the radioactive seafood that dies end up to? On the ocean floor. And what does a crab do? What is a crab known as? It's a scavenger, right? Public warned not to eat meat from a dead minke whale. You can see the peanut head on him at Pelican Point. Female minke whale beached. Although the whale was not injured, the cause of death is not clear and is therefore not safe to eat. He says the whale may have lost its way. He's lost its way, yeah. Because the ocean is not a natural environment for whales, right? Efforts by members of the public to push it back into the ocean is futile, of course. It was 15 meters, 45 feet. Clearly it's emaciated, though, when you're looking at it. This is the model of, to your top left is 20 days of radioactive fallout of the plutonium-239 dispersal. A rare whale washes up on a California beach as part of a big problem. In the last 20 years, only 8 fin whales were found dead on the north coast. That one there is severe. Now, fin whales are generally very streamlined. This one is emaciated, though, and it's clearly emaciated as you start to look at it. Well, they're very. They don't have any extra weight on a typical fin whale, right? They're very, very amazing, very streamlined. What I call streamlined animals, but there's a difference between that and emaciation. That's clearly emaciation. It's incredibly emaciated. After an endangered fin whale. Now they say it was killed by a ship strike. Which is, it happens, because it doesn't mean they got killed by the ship strike, but because they're floating around, they get, and so there's so many of them, they can get hit by ships. The biggest threat they face is a vessel strike. Just bear with me for one moment. I just think it's insane that the world doesn't understand radiation, and that there's so much work goes into. Here we go. There's a ridiculous amount of work that goes into brainwashing the population. Let me just remind you of some of these statistics. So when you say the biggest threat they face, and we get the top one out today, is vessel strikes. I'll remind you of this story here from 2023. Sailboat crew rescued in the Pacific after abandoning a ship sunk by a whale. But the statistics, and we'll go back over to the other screen for that one so you can actually see it a bit. There have been reports of about 1,200 whales and boat colliding. That don't mean they all died. Since the worldwide database was launched in 2007. Right? So if the biggest threat to whales is ship strikes, vessel strikes, then why do we see 70 emaciated grey whales? They didn't get emaciated because of a ship. Why was there 7,000 extra humpback whales discovered that starved to death? Not ship strikes, but starved to death. And this is on top of a 6-year and still ongoing unusual mortality event for humpback whales. But they also have an unusual mortality event for grey whales. Climate change likely played. No, it's very dishonest to use that phrase in this context. 40% drop, which is 10,350 dead whales, grey whales. Not ship strikes, which there are certain in that story. Here we go. Let's keep going here. So they're very dishonest when they say the biggest threat to whales is ship strikes. Clearly it's not. What was it? Over 300 fin whales washed up in 2016. They've never seen in Ecuador, was it? Or Chile or something? I should bring up rather than saying that, but I got too much. Let's keep going. I might bring it up later because I'm stupid like that. They were gathering the initial samples, and an all call was issued to scientists across the North Coast to hightail it to 10 Mile Beach for an opportunity to perform a necropsy / autopsy on what has been determined to be a subadult female approximately 40 feet in length, weighing several tons. Well, it should weigh more than that. The largest specimen can attain lengths of 85 feet and weigh 77 to 81 tons. And this one was how big? 40 feet. So it should have weighed at least 10, 12, 14 minimum. And maybe 30, maybe 40 tons, right? Because you actually get, the bigger ones will weigh, say, 77 tons. So a 40-footer should weigh at least 30 tons to 40 tons. So when you say weighs several tons, you have to start asking questions, right? But clearly, you can see the peanut head. Clearly, the whale's emaciated. That's a clear emaciation as you get right there. And when you're looking at pictures of it, you got to go pre-Fukushima pictures. Here we go. Especially the tails it did give away, right? The peanut head is a giveaway too. The concaved, what they call a peanut head. Dana, you're a peanut head. I know. Based on the state of the body, the team concluded it was in good condition with adequate fat stores consistent with a healthy diet. Let me run that again. Based on the state of the body, the team concluded it was in good condition with an adequate fat stores consistent with a healthy diet. How many times we've covered just thousands of these studies? How many times have we heard that narrative? We haven't, have we? A couple of times maybe, close to that narrative. With adequate. So what are you talking about? Like 10 inches of blubber, 2 inches of blubber? So why would you say inadequate fat stores, if you're doing a necropsy, why would you say his stomach was full of its favorite food, right? Why would you frame the narrative that way? Well, because the stomach was empty. Otherwise, they would have said the stomach was full of its favorite food. I'm going to turn the volume 1 second. It's so hot. All you're doing is you're making those noises you make when something's really hot, right? Now I know I had a comment there when I logged into there that I was about as smart as a chimpanzee, is what he said. I actually have a rebuttal for that one. Let me see if I can find it real quick here. Because when I plug in this one to the system, everything shifts on me. Not like it is. Oh, I found it. There we go. All right. Just bear with me 1 second.
Chimpanzees count.
Are you smarter than a chimpanzee? Are you smarter than a chimpanzee? This was a study on a chimpanzee. I watched the whole thing. It was only a short video.
Chimpanzees count from 1 to 9 in the right order in return for a peanut or other tasty reward.
I like
yes,
peanuts.
They can. Now, if you just flash the 9 numerals for a moment, then cover them, can a chimpanzee remember where each numeral was and still get the order they were in right? Yes, for another tasty treat. This chimp got this wrong once, but thought nothing of it, and undaunted, went right back to getting them all correct. Now, if you flash just some of the 9 numerals, then cover them, can a chimp A, remember where each was, and B, in the right order, even though some were missing? Yes. Slowing down not one bit. And note, chimps can also eat and memorize at the same time.
Anyway, let's keep going. Based on the state of the body, the team concluded it was in good condition. Well, did it have a full stomach or not? Why would you say that? Why would he even suggest that, see? Well, clearly it's emaciated. These animals can be killed by a simple fishing trawler, Grimes says. Such a dishonest people, eh? It's 100%. It can be hit. It can be hit when it's dead too, right? It's not just applicable. I mean, the total numbers of ship strikes that are confirmed, reported, was about 1,200 reports. Not all the whales would have died. And that's a worldwide database launched in 2007, pre-Fukushima. But you got tens of thousands of whales of different species. There's 10,000 beak whales died a few years ago in United Kingdom waters, in the Atlantic. And they found 1,000. They were in different stages of decomposition. So it was going on for a long time. They were emaciated. We covered this stuff. which meant at least 10,000 of them had died. So you had 10,350 grey whales confirmed dead. You had 7,000 extra humpback whales confirmed dead after an ongoing 5-6 year unusual mortality event. You had at least 10,000 culvert beak whales in the United Kingdom. We see mass species die off of all different whales. Let's keep her rolling here. They can't stop their boat in time to avoid a ship strike. Yeah, but they don't have to because there's only 1,200 reported since 2007. Why are whales committing suicide? If there's a big ship strike, it must be suicide by the whales because the statistics are not showing what they're suggesting. Members of the public should take note that collecting any parts from a protected species is illegal and could result in criminal consequences. So you're not allowed to take a piece, dry it out, and check it for radiation on your own, right? Contact your local stranding network immediately. There wasn't very many of them pre-Fukushima. Post-Fukushima, every town almost got one now. This is radioactive fallout. I can't remember. Was it Xenon-133? Cesium-137? This was 20 days after Fukushima. But the consensus we're seeing is a mass die-off of all species, not just whales. Let me fix that. I'm a bit lazy today. Bit lazy. Sometimes that's the way it plays out, right? Let me turn up one of my lights here. I'm not lazy, I'm just busted up. Pretty darn good. Just give me 1 second here. I'll turn up that other one. I'm always getting into trouble. I'm always getting into trouble. There we keep going here. In the last 20 years, only 8 fin whales were found dead allegedly on the north coast. That doesn't mean there's not thousands everywhere else. Ship strike likely killed, because they're not supposed to be on the north coast, right? Ship strike likely killed beach young fin whale. Well, that's an awful lot of fin whales we're seeing, isn't it? Ship strikes are the number one cause of fin whale premature deaths worldwide, according to a scientific study. But that's simply not true, is it? The total was around 1,200 reported whale and boat collisions since the database started in 2007. So, let's go back a little bit for one moment, and let's look at the legacy, some of the legacies, this is a fraction of it, of whales. Very emaciated. Same thing with seabirds, right? Emaciated. Everything is starving to death, withering away. Every bird we're seeing is starving to death. There was over 1 million common murres and 1.4 million Cassini auklets. Severely emaciated. The fishing out there, all of them are starving. We want whales. Carts filled with emaciated dead birdies. Animals sick, starving, emaciated. Seals, sea lions, everything else. Sardines and crayfish disappeared from the Pacific Ocean. They vanished. Is there any animals dependent upon them? Just a massive migratory species in the ocean and in the air. Marine mammals are starving. Sure sounds like emaciation to me. The pups of the seals and sea lions are so emaciated they're going to shore, but there's nothing to eat on the shoreline. Experts says they're like walking skeletons, extremely emaciated. They're actually eating the rocks. Normally the rocks would have all kinds of food attached to it, right? and they would excrete it once they got enough energy. Killer whales. In 2014, no babies born in the previous 2 years. Very sick, very emaciated. They estimated 1,000,000 or 1,000 atoms a kilogram of just cesium for those post-Fukushima. Seals and sea lions are starving to death. Acute hemorrhaging found in dead owls along the west coast 8 months after Fukushima. Quite a coincidence, isn't it? Very poor condition, badly emaciated. Extinction a threat for salmon, loss of sardines, the squid, the sea urchins, the kelp. I was on the ocean doing research expeditions. Let me just touch on that for a minute. A lot of these reports would have been about my research. And so I'd done from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska for 6 years. 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean without coming ashore. Well, you go in for fuel and that, right? But straight back out on the ocean. Once you had laundry, picked up your groceries, got your fuel and supplies, and head back out on the ocean again. And this was what it was typically like. It would have been nice if it was always just out enjoy your day. This was nasty stuff. That's the end of... that was in Haida Gwaii, formerly known as the Queen Charlotte Islands. That was a nasty experience each year. And we had a lot of documentation before we headed out on the ocean. We wanted to see ourselves, whether we were going to be able to identify it, right? The reactors actually melted down, multiple reactors. The radioactive fallout, the French government said it was 1 million or 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. And so we went out, and what we discovered was the species to your left, due to the perpetual radioactive fallout. I mean, we done the whole coastline. The species to your left didn't recover. That's why we went back for 5 more years after the first year to see if the species to the left started to recover, show back up. Because typically, if I plow in that beach so that it looks like this, then the species will just come up from deeper on both sides and fill in the gap quite quickly because that's prime real estate, right? And this is British Columbia's coastline. It's a tropical rainforest. And you got a 19-foot tide exchange. So there was an incredible amount of species. There was 700 algae, kelps. There was 5,500 invertebrates without the backbones living in the 700 algae that were identified. A lot more than that, but that's what they had actually named and identified. There was 78 to 80 species of starfish. There's around 76, 78 species of sea anemones. And each of these and each species came in multiple vibrant colors. There was an incredible amount of shellfish, right? It wasn't just like the snails or the periwinkles and stuff like that, which are snails. And there's all kinds of different types of snails, like the long skinny ones, you know, the circles. There was those shaped like a little teepee, like you get hundreds of thousands of them on a rock, for instance. There was razorback clams, little neck, Manila's clams. There was gooey ducks, which is a big, huge, very old clam. There's the scallops, multiple species of scallops, some of them large, some of them small. There was oysters. There was mussels. There was an incredible diversity just of shellfish. There was 480 species of worms, sea worms. 480 species, pretty incredible, eh? There was this incredible, amazing, wonderful, and the sea urchins were prolific. Just football, carpets and carpets for miles and miles at a time. And you'll find starfish, what's interesting about the starfish is just they're so prolific in all oceans, but you'll find them heavily populated all the way down in, say, 900 feet. And So then the question is, why didn't all of these species, because the ocean is typically a glass of salt water, would have 1 billion creatures, right? And 75 to 100 million of them per glass of water is so for a glass of water, there's about 1 billion species, and 75 to 100 million of them are the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. But the rest of it was the eggs and larvae of all of these species. It was basically a soup of life. Incredible soup of life. Very, very special, actually. In British Columbia, it was like that in 2011, but just after that, it was wiped out. Yeah. So there was this incredible, wonderful diversity that was completely annihilated by Fukushima's radioactive fallout. There's many, many studies to quantify that. But we went back for years and years and years. Let's keep going on the show here. We went back for years and years and years. Doing the research for 6 years. Brutal. I was under siege. People attacked me constantly. I was given gag orders by the Canadian government multiple times to protect some of their assets. You know, and you'll hear the word bird flu a lot, right? When it comes to the species. Explosion of sea lion deaths in Peru amid deadly bird flu outbreak. But that's not a bird flu outbreak, right? They're showing you. That's an emaciated sea lion. And they have multiple pictures like this where they show you emaciated sea lions. But they conflated it inappropriately with bird flu. Bird flu it takes a very long time for a sea lion to become that emaciated, right? And that the radioactive fallout over North America there was so much of it. These were both, that's a Canadian study, and so is this one. That's another Canadian study. But they didn't cover up these reactors because it's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine. They covered it up because Fukushima is an extinction event. Let's keep going here. I don't know where we left off. Sick and emaciated. There we go. That's basically right there, I think, or something. Yeah, that's it there. Let's move past all of this. And then the bird die-off wasn't just one species. And notice back then they weren't mentioning bird flu. It was avian species, common thick-billed murres, the kittiwakes, which are like, they look like seagulls, right? But they're really small. And like the species we got out here 2 years ago and the year before hadn't laid any eggs. Nothing. There was no fledglings whatsoever in the research that I was doing. Puffins. We know the puffins failed not last year, the year before here in the Atlantic. In fact, a lot of the puffins had laid eggs later in the season, which was unheard of in desperation, right? Gulls, sooty, and short-tailed shearwater. And we see a big die-off of the migratory shearwaters. And some of the avian mortalities were concurrent with whales, seals, sea lions, sea otters, fish mortalities, dolphins. The ongoing fish famine, that's 2016. I was out doing research expeditions during that too. Most of the reports in those 6-year period were based on my research because I was publishing it up at my website. Facing the possibility of an extinction. We may be on the precipice of a major extinction event in marine wildlife. And now during all of that, the word avian influenza was never heard. Like they were talking about domoic acid, but they can never conflate it with the actual die-offs, right? And most of that was coming from NOAA. They were the perpetual propaganda machine. A big rise in stranded dolphin numbers, says rescuers. They're going to blame it on this time, I wonder. A marine life rescue charity, which is the only one allowed to go near these animals, and privileged, I'd never before seen so many stranded dolphins and porpoises on beaches across Merseyside. It's not clear whether the rise is linked to climate change. So next time you get pulled over, the police ask you, what's your hurry? You say climate change. They'll let you go. And next time you go home and your partner asks you why you're late, cause you, instead of saying I was at the pub with my buddies, just say climate change. They'll forget about it right away. It's unclear, like climate change is which is radioactive fallout for 80 years, pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. And the radiation that we release into the environment from 1,000 fuel pools worldwide that are all the fuel is splitting atoms. All the fuel we ever created on this planet for 80 years is most of it is sitting in fuel pools splitting atoms. That's why fuel is dangerous, is because it's sitting in a fuel pool splitting atoms. Those atoms are released to tall skinny stacks on the site. It is unclear whether the rise is linked to climate change affecting sea temperatures. So why would you invoke that then? If it's unclear, if you can't quantify it, that's not scientific. You're scientists. Give us something solid. Don't give us conjectures and opinions. Am I wrong in asking for them to be clear about it? Let me keep going here. So last night, linked to climate change affecting sea temperatures. There's no show last night. We were getting rain today. We had snow for the last couple of days. Now we got rain. And now again, the night now is minus 15. Tomorrow will be minus 20 wind chills. And so everything's going to be frozen, brutal. There's going to be ice everywhere. And so last night I decided I was going to go out and plow the property net so that it didn't get a big thick ice buildup, because it doesn't look like we're going to get look like winter usually shows up here in February, right? In March and April, and then May or something, it's most things are starting to melt. And so I didn't want to get caught with a lot of ice anyway, right? So I went out last night and cleaned up. And it took the good out of me, right? Or simply due to people being more aware of how to report cases. And so I can't do everything. I was out working all day yesterday on equipment. And I was out again last evening in the dark because I realized that we're going to get caught out with ice. I didn't want to get I've had it happen to me before. It's very scary trying to get out of the driveway because I'm on a drop. Or simply due to people being more aware how to report cases, the charity said. Or simply due to people being more aware of how to report cases. So it's either climate change or people being more aware. So what they're basically trying to suggest is that it's normal. It's normal post-Fukushima, but pre-Fukushima it's not. She's been a charity medic for 7.5 years. A medic. Rescuing seals, the porpoise, and dolphins, which have never showed up there pre-Fukushima ever. Right? For them to show up, it's the same as the sperm whales. You should never be in that water. They had 10 emaciated showed up on their beaches at the one time, and they managed to every story was just making stuff up about it. So 7.5 years is Fukushima happened almost 6 years before that, right? And because they won't acknowledge Fukushima, they don't get their face in the... It's quite unusual in terms of the places they're stranding. We've never seen so many. No, you've never seen any pre-Fukushima whatsoever. Another member of the charity said anyone coming across a porpoise, dolphin, or whale on the beach should contact the charity. Well, how come their fisheries and oceans ain't doing this job? Why are charities doing it? Of course, the monarchy in the United Kingdom owns all the carcasses that washes up. And particularly the whales, because they like to recover the vomit, which is worth millions of dollars. This will give you any instructions you might be able to do as a member of the public. This will give you... Why is a charity dictating to the public? How did they become the public's overseers? It might include keeping the animal cool. It might include riding the animal until the medical team gets there. But they'll be quite specific in what they tell you. But why is it a charity, a non-profit, dictating this to you? Because they're not... You can't get a freedom of information and get the documentation from a charity like you could with the government, right? That's why they do it that way. But what we would never expect anyone to do is refloat an animal on their own, because you might damage the animal further and it might not be in the right condition to be refloated. First off, it's not in the right condition if it's on the beach. That's the wrong spot, and all the pressure is on his organs. There's an urgency to get it back in the water. Waiting for a bunch of self-centered, egotistic whack jobs from a charity is the opposite of what is moral and ethical. They train 1,000 volunteers per year and has 25 whale flotation pontoons at strategic locations across the United Kingdom. So why would you have 1,000 volunteers per each year trained and 25 flotation pontoons at strategic locations across the United Kingdoms post-Fukushima when you didn't have it pre-Fukushima? Why is that? It was really, really skinny. There's another word for that. It's called emaciated. So the dolphins were really, really skinny, which means you can get it back in the water really quick. But you can't, because the charity is your god down there, apparently. It was really, really emaciated. That's what she was trying to say. Mrs. Cable said the whale had got to the mudflats on the beach and was really skinny. But because it was in really poor condition, would not found its way back out to sea because it's stupid. Right? Everything they find is too stupid. That's why it showed up. It's maybe the dolphins had autism from radiation fallout, see? Separated from a larger group. And it had likely, that's a conjecture, that's an opinion. Healy Hansen. You don't suppose it has something to do with perpetual radioactive fallout from multiple nuclear reactors and 8 fuel pools that melted down at the one time, do you? Why are peregrine falcon numbers dying in the United States again? Well, it had happened during the DDT era. So there is a precedent that showed that they're susceptible to being poisoned. Just imagine that. So is it a stretch to suggest that they're susceptible to radioactive fallout too, to the bioaccumulation, and they're not producing babies? In a decline not seen since the DDT era, and they knew DDT, yet, like they were spraying it, going to schools and spraying it on the children, lining them up in the playground and the schoolyards, and just go. And the ones who were doing the spraying were wearing these suits, like space suits, because, you know, it's so safe. Had noticeably decreased in numbers over the past 2 years. Maybe they got no food. Some concerned experts. So when I say experts, why say some? Because the other ones don't agree with the some, right? Believe avian flu is to blame. I knew it. I know it. Some concerned. Why wouldn't you say experts believe avian flu is to blame? Why would you say some? Because clearly people disagreed. They chose the pro-nuclear academics / experts. This picture, by the way, is from 2020. They screw up everything they touch, these people do, don't they? Something disturbing is happening to the peregrine falcons in North America. Numbers headed downwards for the first time since the 60s and 70s. Well, maybe there was another big pollution event. And the 60s and 70s, by the way, that's when nuclear testing was out there and heavy. So maybe it wasn't DDT. Maybe it had something to do with the massive nuclear war they call nuclear testing. That's a nuclear war. It's the same radioactive fallout, same bombs. Radioactive fallout doesn't care if it's done in anger or done in stupidity. And just one list, the Castle Bravo in the Marshall Islands covered the planet, brutal radioactive fallout. Just the Castle Bravo shot, nuclear explosion, was equal to 1,000 Nagasaki bombs going off at the same time, right? And the difference between the Nagasaki and Hiroshima was the Nagasaki is a plutonium bomb. So maybe the peregrine falcons got sick because of DDT, but got sick because of perpetual radioactive fallout, which seemed to happen to a lot of people in a lot of different states, wasn't it? Maybe that's more like it. In the 60s and 70s, most of the nesting adults are banned. Think about how crazy these people are that they're banding every way. Maybe the birds can't function because they all got bands on them. The mark of the beast on every one of them. I recently spoke with Kathy Clark, chief of the New Jersey Endangered No-Game Species Program, told me the peregrines nesting in their states have had an abnormally high adult replacement rate for the past couple of years. Healthy raptor populations always have a good supply of floaters. Non-breeding adults that are ready to step in and one or both birds are at an irate die. But if the surplus dwindles, the species can. So there's less females than males, is what they're saying. Which is typical for sex ratio studies after radioactive fallout pollution, right? That's what you're looking for, is more males than females. But DDT poisons both males and females. And DDT and radiation causes the animals, the birds, rather to lay thin eggs. We've seen the same with DDT, that often fail to hatch. But this is something we know is true for radiation, though. Do you really think that the industry wouldn't conflate DDT with the nuclear industry wouldn't conflate it and suggest it's DDT rather than blame it on radiation? And we're seeing that the thin shells in the bird population in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick studies were a total failure of the population, and the birds that were born died within a week or something. The fledgling, the hatchlings did. Just not enough extra falcons to replace the breeders when needed. Well, there never was extra. The population is usually males and females, right? So such dishonest people lay thin shells, which is what we're seeing post Fukushima. This seems to be happening now. Of 44 nesting peregrines, half of them were missing this year. Yeah, because the bioaccumulation of radiation probably got nothing to do with it. The normal replacement rate is 15%. Now it's up to 60%. Those missing birds are dead. The falcon will not abandon its nest territory. So what did they die of? Because they're the top of the food chain. They're eating the species that are bioaccumulating. They're eating a lot of them. There's some turnover, or they're starving to death now. We've had some turnovers in the past, but it was nothing like this year. In the Atlantic coast, the birds are usually replaced quickly within days, but this year we had vacant territories on the coast, and a couple of nests had second-year females, which is a concern. Suggests that the floater pool is stretched thin. These are conjectures again, right? Others, including myself, she says, think a likelier possibility is that the dead falcons became infected with the highly pathogenic avian influenza. So again, this is an opinion, a conjecture that shouldn't be in the story. They can't quantify it. So if it was true, because everything is banded, they're watching them like the hawks, they would have took the carcasses and checked it, right? And then they would have been able to quantify and the assertions, right? But again, you got to be very suspect and trusting in them. And what happens with the radiation, by the way, is it gets into the species, and the species now immune systems are compromised. You don't need a highly pathogen avian influenza to cause more harm. You just need some kind of flu, because their immune system now is completely compromised because of the bioaccumulation of radiation. And what I mean by that is the radiation gets into the animals' bodies, or birds, or whatever, and say you got hundreds of thousands of these anthropogenic man-made atoms in their bodies. So every one of them, the body attacks it forever with white blood cells, which displaces red blood cells, and red blood cells carries oxygen and nutrition. And so the more you got in there, the more white blood cells you produce, and the less oxygen you have in your body, the less nutrition you have in your body. So your immune system is compromised, and it continues to get worse and worse because you're now, everything's permeated with anthropogenic man-made radioactive fallout. So far, the evidence is circumstantial. Yeah, they could have fucking been UFOs picked them up. It could have been a bunch of invaders cutting through there, decided to eat them. Like you can have these opinions and conjectures unsubstantiated and throw that in, just throwing a big friggin' turd into the punch bowl. After a falcon feeds on a sick bird, the raptor usually flies off to a cliff or other distant perch and ends up dying there within a couple of days. Again, this is a conjecture. They sure spent a lot of time on it, didn't they? No evidence. When they're studying them all the time, how come they didn't pick up a few of the bodies? Well, they're saying, well, they went off to distant places, we couldn't get the bodies. Does anybody really believe this? This is not just an East Coast problem. They spoke with Skip Ambrose, who began monitoring the peregrines on the upper Yukon River of Alaska in 1993, has continued ever since. And even though he's been retired for a decade, he and his wife have their own boat and cruise a 165-mile stretch of the river each year in late May and June to determine nest site occupancy. Now, I've done research expeditions for 6 years on the West Coast, and the species were completely missing, and I was demonized and vilified and marginalized and smeared. Even today I'm smeared constantly. There's an insidious amount of propaganda attacking me. It's just, like, I'm not a bad person for doing research, for doing field studies. Yeah, what you're seeing is post-Fukushima attributes, right? Adults were missing. It wasn't just adults, the babies were missing too, apparently. What they call thin shells, but this we're talking about the Atlantic side, I think, was it? Or no, they're talking about Alaska. A third of the nest sites he visited were unoccupied, and some only had one falcon present with no sign of breeding. And the fact we're seeing single birds at a nest site means that the floating population must be way down. He speculates, again, that avian influenza is to blame. Again, it's speculation. That has nothing to do with the facts. Because when you look at the bigger picture, We'll get to it. We used to see 16, 18 pairs, they said, but this year they located 5, and only 2 of them produce young, which corresponds with the New Brunswick, Nova Scotia studies that we've covered here. Interestingly, the peregrines in the eastern part of Washington, as well as in the cities, do not seem to be affected yet. In the cities. Well, there's another thing is that the trees bioaccumulate radiation, right? And then the falcons like to live at the top of these trees. And so at a certain point each year, you have this pollen from all the trees being released. And that's radioactive pollen, as we know, right? We've covered that over the years quite a bit, the radioactive pollen, how that works. And the pollen, the trees have been gathering radiation for 80 years. There are still many questions at this point. Is avian influenza indeed causing a decline in peregrine numbers, or is it something else? Gee, you don't suppose it could be Fukushima? The effect? Like the plumes covered the entire planet. They're still hemorrhaging, and this stuff never goes away. It never goes away. And then seafood is known to bioaccumulate massive amount of radiation. Let me keep going here. Or is it something else? I just wanted to show a model to articulate that. So this model is 19 days, 19.5 days, 468 hours of radioactive fallout. Rare pygmy sperm whale found washed up on Galveston Beach. Very little information available with that species. Is rarely seen in the wild. That's a peanut head. You can see it. According to the Texas Marine Mammal Stranding Network, they did not reveal a cause of death. The deep diving mammals feed primarily on small, very tiny species and shellfish at a depth of like shrimp and that, at a depth of up to 4,000 feet. Well, there's going to be huge radiation gathered up on the ocean floor. Threats to the species include vessel strikes. Again, this is not true, is it? You have 1,200 strikes in 2023 accumulated since 2007 worldwide. 10,000 gray whales dead, 10,350, and the majority of them are emaciated. Same thing with the humpback whales. They estimate at least 7,000 of them, extra ones, because they were missing from the catalog, so they assumed they were dead, and they assumed they were emaciated. Hunting, entanglement in fishing gear, marine debris, and ocean noise. Yeah, or lack of food, starvation. How about that? They've also repeatedly been found to have plastic in their stomach upon stranding. We covered a story about 3 years ago where at that point there wasn't an actual whale, dolphin, etc., that actually died of plastic. And the ones that did have plastic in them, it wasn't the cause of death. It was the only thing they had in their stomach. They had no food whatsoever. So plastic was eaten maybe in desperation would make sense. But when you put radiation into the equation and how it breaks the food chain and how it causes leukemia in the whales and everything else, you start getting a different picture of what might be going on. Minke whale found in Hampton believed to have died of disease. He's very decomposed, this fella. He was found to be thin and had no food in his digestive system. So why didn't that fin whale they were talking about earlier when they had done a necropsy on it, an autopsy on it, why didn't they tell us whether he had food or not? They just said he seemed healthy. That's the opposite of, like, he's either got lots of blubber or he got very little blubber. There's, right, it's not a hard sentence to write down for somebody. He was found to be thin. That's another word that we use for emaciated. I forgot to turn down the microphone again. Slurping. I don't need this. It's not quite as hot as it was earlier. That and other evidence led experts to believe the whale died of disease. Because it's emaciated, like thousands of humpback whales and thousands of gray whales and thousands of seals and thousands of sea lions, etc., etc. It was found to be thin and had no food in his digestive tract. Well, like if there was a disease, then they would have, they would have articulated some of the attributes, right? Thin is typically no food in his digestive tract is starvation. 2 dead minke whales found on the South Shore. Who responded and what they learned so far? It's hard to like academics or journalists, isn't it? A dead minke whale washed ashore in Plymouth over the week, marking the second such incident on the South Shore in a 5-week period. Like originally after Fukushima, they found a couple of whales on the same beach, and it was so unusual. They said, I can't remember, the odds were astronomical. You would find 2 dead whales on the same beach. Basically, had better chance of getting hit by a Soviet satellite in the next 3 seconds. The cause of whale death was not immediately apparent. An unusual mortality event was declared for minke whales also along the Atlantic coast and the Pacific, by the way, due to the unprecedented number of deaths. Specifically, vessel strikes, accidental entanglement in fishing gear, as well as infectious diseases. Well, infectious diseases could be conflated easily with Fukushima, but vessel strikes is not true. The total number of vessel strikes since 2007 and 2023, the story is March the 20th, 2023, the total number was 1,200 reports of whales and boats colliding. Not all the whales died, since the worldwide database launched in 2007. Since 2011, we've seen every species show up emaciated, severe emaciation, and in numbers that are unprecedented. Rare fin whale, the greyhound of the sea, found dead on Mendocino, is that Mexico or something, coast, may have suffered a vessel strike. Again, right? But the total number of vessel strikes, reality was, up to 2023, was only 1,200 worldwide since 2007. I really disrespect him. But that whale is clearly emaciated. That's ridiculously emaciated. May have suffered a vessel strike. Yeah, maybe got hit by a satellite. Unprecedented numbers of Florida manatees have died in recent years. And emaciated. To show you one that's healthy. Left the sea cows emaciated and dying. Nearly 2,000 manatees died in Florida because the radiation destroyed the ecosystem, so their favorite food, seagrass, wasn't able to be proliferate anymore. And they shouldn't be in Florida, if I remember correctly. So they were buying, what was it, $80,000 worth of lettuce in just 1 month or something to feed the starving manatees? Two predators in one frame. Mountain lion versus a coyote. So whoever owns that property got a beautiful little spot there. And look out the window, you see and we're seeing a lot, increase of cougar encounters, right? Because they're natural prey. They're coming out looking for cats and dogs in the communities all the time now because there's nothing left in the forest for them. That's an insane picture, though. Imagine looking at your window and seeing a cougar. Now, to me, that cougar is looking pretty darn good. He's looking pretty good to me. I've encountered him because I lived out in British Columbia. You didn't leave when you left the house in the morning, or you come home at night. You always check for cougars. And bears you don't mind, and deer you didn't. You always see. You always have deer and bear in my gardens every week. But cougars, man, they're a formidable opponent, and they'll take you down just for fun. Keep her going here. It's a big cat. He is very unconcerned about us. Yeah, but we're seeing a lot of those stories. I got more coming up. Probably won't get to it tonight. 4 dead whales washed up on the British coast in distressing scene after 9 got lost. Yeah, they got lost. Because they're just stupid animals. They didn't get lost pre-Fukushima, then they got lost post-Fukushima. And they usually find them way up to fresh water, right? Let's come over to the pole. We haven't touched the pole here for a bit. Is radioactive fallout behind extinction level event, ELE, a mass species die-off worldwide post-Fukushima nuclear meltdowns? Yep. It's 100% true, right? What's that? Next story. 4 dead whales. Yeah, it's the same story basically. Distressing scene after 9 got lost. Like, what are you talking about? 9 got lost. I got 12 whales there. I counted. The tragedy comes after a pod of 9 pilot whales lost their way earlier this week. Lost their way. And so, post-Fukushima, the stranding's been happening 20 to 50 times a year. But pre-Fukushima was very rare. Extremely rare. He said because it's relatively unusual, it brings a crowd. So these were pilot whales we're talking about, right? Just bear with me then. La 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 la. Because in 2014, 2015, 2016, pilot whales were generally described as emaciated or their stomachs were empty. And I'm not sure if we'll get lucky enough. The problem is we got so much, eh? You actually can't keep up with it. Okay, I know it's a better way to go about it. Oh. Oh, that did work. Here we go. And there's some conflicting. Just let me get to it here. So, 25 pilot whales found dead in Marco Island, January 24, 2014. They said they lost their way. I screwed up today. Maybe I screwed up, right? Where are we to here? Right there. Beluga whales. Yeah, I didn't get the rest of it, I guess. Hang on. That won't take very long. So the 25 pilot whales were found dead in 2014 were empty stomachs, and there was the whales that died in the Everglades also had empty stomachs, the pilot whales. But that was typical. 2014, 15, 2016, 17. They would report on the health of their diets now, right? Whether there's anything in their stomach. But in 2018, they stopped doing that. And since then, they have stopped doing it. Brits are warned off the beach after a carcass of giant sea animals washed up. Yeah, the poor British boy, I tell you, man. The beast thought to be a minke or a fin whale. A minke or a fin whale. The local found it was scared. He said, I was a bit scared at first. I never seen a whale. I hesitated because I wasn't sure if it was alive or dead. So when you looked at that, you didn't know if it was alive or dead. Can anybody believe that statement? So they usually ask the most unaware person, right? So they took an opinion from somebody who's never even seen a whale before, and then they put that in their article. Because they had nothing to hide, I guess. Oh dear, what's the matter? Two dead minke whales found on the south shore who responded and what they learned so far. The cause of the whale's death was not immediate apparent. Now that's something that we've only seen since around 2017, 2018. Usually they were pretty candid about what they were seeing. So you can see clearly they got the whale open right up. Summer was exceptionally busy for stranding responders in the northeast. Minke whale deaths are not new to the Atlantic. No, there's an unusual mortality event. So it is new, only post-Fukushima though. For minke whales along they got it there actually. 174 total dead whales, 60 of them in Massachusetts. It's crazy numbers, right? And they're emaciated, and we know that because we've been covering it for over 13 years straight. Necropsies results from the stranding shows evidence of human interaction, specifically vessel strikes and entanglement as well as infectious diseases. So you'll see this narrative show up over and over and over. But they acknowledge that they don't know what caused the death. They didn't say it was not immediate appearance, so clearly it's not a ship strike. They got the animal open right up. Whales.org. A world where every whale and dolphin is safe and free. I mean, these people are unbelievable. The callousness of these people. This is criminal what they do, eh? 2 dead minke whales found on the south shore. 2 whales on the same beach. Pre-Fukushima, the odds of that was considered inconceivable. 7 whales dead on the same beach after washing up on a beach. 7. A pod of 11 whales trapped at a mud flat at low tide in an estuary, so they're in fresh water. Situation's ongoing. It was very difficult to get to them. Sometimes strand and one is ill. Sometimes they're all starved to death and emaciated and they can't go any further. You ever think about that one? We've seen that in 2014, 15, 16, and 17 because they used to report on the health of the whales and what was in their stomach. We ask that there is a minimal disturbance in the air, the land, in the area, the land, and the air to allow the relevant organizations to continue their work. These are all foundations, though. These are non-profit organizations. This is not universities. This is not academics, because they don't want them there making a consensus that can be sourced through the Freedom of Information file request, right? 1 killer whale dead, others stranded in Russia's Far East. A group of killer whales were stranded in estuaries of all places in Russia's Far East territory, Kamchatka. Of course, Kamchatka is where they done all the nuclear testing in the Soviet time, right? Due to a low tide. What were they doing in a nuclear meltdown area or a nuclear wasteland from nuclear testing, resulting in the death of 1 whale, killer whales? And killer whales will likely return to sea once the tide rises. Excuse me. Climate Canada beluga whales. Climate Canada beluga whales. I can't even wrap my mind around that. The industry is just revolting, isn't it? Climate and a beluga whale. It's just so confusing when you see the Climate Canada. That's why I don't keep any sharp objects on the desk here, because I'll be poking myself in the friggin' eye with it every other minute. La 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 la. La 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 la. I don't know. Let's just keep going here. A pod of beluga whales surface as they swim through the Churchill River, August the 5th, 2024. Beluga whales helped Canadian woman heal after a polar bear attack. What was it? 3,000 polar bears in an Al Jazeera story were emaciated. It was 2016 or 17 or something. I could probably find that. La 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 la. We'll find something anyway. Emaciated polar bear in Russia. City. Yeah, that's just a ridiculous amount of emaciated. And then you might see like big fat bears because their thyroid gland is all screwed up, right? I can't find them. Oh well, let's keep going, I guess. Well, here's one. I got a video there I can show you, but I'm not going to show it to you because it's brutal. Emaciated polar bear. That's really bad there, right? Let me see if I can find a healthy one to give you some comparison. I got healthy ones here too. Now what? There we go. Some idiot is out there on the quad this hour at night. I got that video there. I'm not going to play. Let's keep going here because we're running out of time. 2 whales found dead within 2 days in New Jersey, New York waters. That's emaciated. That's emaciated. Yeah, I knew that was going to happen to me. Just bear with me. A little bit further past here, down to here. I'm just going to have to clean the top part here. Because I have so much, right? That if I don't gut the stories I already covered and I get lost, it's really difficult to find my way back to where I was. Lucky for me, I just imported a couple of pictures of whales, so it's not too hard for me to get back here. I'm just going to gut that right now because it's easier to find my way around. Because we go through a lot of stuff, right? A lot of documentation. Holy crap, we've covered a lot tonight, didn't we? Kicking some serious ass here tonight. Right there. La la la. Here we go. We're back on track here. Yeah, we're not going to get through very much of this tonight, but it looks like 2 whales found dead within 2 days. A young minke whale washed ashore, and less than 24 hours later, another one was found floating off Staten Island. It's absurd, eh? They're noticeably absent, so where have all the insects gone? There's a lot of dead whales, isn't it? Like, it's absurd how many dead whale stories I'm talking about just since the last show. It's absurd. Where have all the insects gone is the greatest question ever. The year 2024 has proven to be one where the lack of insects in the countryside, especially gardens, has become particularly noticeable. It's just not a local occurrence, as it is thought that the insect population globally has fallen by some 75% in the last 50 years post-nuclear fallout. So if you look back 50 years, the nuclear weapons, like cancer epidemic started in the 70s after a couple of decades of nuclear fallout. You see the decline of all the species with the nuclear industry. Surveys taking place in the developed countries, and a lot of them indicated worrying loss of insects, but information is hard to come by in many parts of the world where facilities to employ research into the subject simply do not exist. Squashed insects found on a number of plates of vehicles was noted and collected, and a drop of 78% was recorded up to 2023. And we done a study in 2014, 2015 on insects. And one of them was at Cathedral Grove on Vancouver Island for just like a week each time. And so Cathedral Grove is about 70 miles of old growth cedar forest. These are huge, monstrous trees, right? And it's just a haven for insects. And so we used to check. There was a gas station on one side of it and another gas station in Port Alberni on the other side of it. And I would go to the gas stations where all the Beakish motorhomes, beautiful motorhomes, a lot of them were brand new kind of. They would pull in. There's a big parking areas for them. I would go over and ask him, I was studying insects, can I take a quick look at the front of your vehicle? And I would ask him, how many times did you have to clean the insects off their windshield? And they were like, you know what, we haven't. And honey, how many? And then they would they get really interested all of a sudden because it didn't strike them. It slipped their. They were kind of happy, right? They didn't, but then they're like, what's going on? I got attacked big time for doing those studies, eh? And there were spots on the highways, like at the beautiful highways going down through there, and then there's these big ravines on both sides. So what they done was they built high walls on both sides, and there's these pockets there where all the dirt and sand and everything gathers up. And so I searched them out too, and there's no insects in them because you get a lot of vehicle strikes in those areas, right? Insect strikes rather in those areas with vehicles. No insects. And that was another thing we were doing in the forest every day on the research expedition. You go up into the forest looking for insects. And the coastline of British Columbia, I showed those stuff earlier, had 30,000 species of insects at the high tide zone that were dependent on low tide. And they were missing, which is what we postulated originally before we done the research. This year on the island, young bats have been found to be undernourished due to a lack of insects. And so bats, we've seen quite a few stories on bats in the last 3 or 4 years, haven't we? A decline in insect-eating bird species such as spotted flycatchers, cuckoos, for example, are very noticeable for a few years, many years, post-Fukushima. The annual big butterfly count run by Butterfly Conservations, it's like 75 or more % of the monarchs now are gone. We won't get to that story tonight, but tomorrow night. Has the lowest ever number recorded in 14 years since it's been running. The major concern is, without a doubt, the lack of bee species. Bee of all types are essential for the pollinators. Well, they're bringing back the plants are radioactive pollen. So they're bringing radioactive pollen back to the bee's nest. Essential for pollination of most of the plants found in the world. They're developing mechanical robot insects now to pollinate plants, right? Overall, the situation not good enough, although it is worth remembering that the changing climate is something which has been happening over a long time. As the human effect on the world that will be difficult to rectify. Climate change is actually real, for sure. Fukushima was a pulse event. And so before Fukushima, it was very unusual to see supercell typhoons, supercell cyclones, supercell hurricanes. Post Fukushima, the majority of them are supercell typhoons, supercell hurricanes, and supercell storms. You're talking about 150, 200, 250 mile per hour winds. And we don't have infrastructure, building codes to build infrastructure to sustain that kind of wind because it's not normal. The nuclear weapons testing. When you look at nuclear weapons testing, and then you look at the weather, you look at the species die-offs, the decline of the species, the proliferation of illnesses and diseases for all species and humans, congenital malformations and everything else, you start to see quite the coincidence constantly. And because I cover this all the time, I'm very sensitive to the omission that this has any adverse side effects, right? Like the French, the equivalent, what the French done to the French Polynesian islands alone was equal to a Nagasaki bomb every week for 12 years. And then everybody there is sick and has incredible health issues. And 11 administrations have refused to acknowledge that there would have been any adverse side effects from the radioactive fallout. And that's quite telling. See, that's quite worrisome that that is even conceivable. World Migratory Bird Day 2024. Protect insects to protect the birds. Protect insects to protect the birds. I think that's what we're going to leave it on right there. Protect insects to protect the birds. We'll pick up there tomorrow night. Yeah. And James actually put out a song yesterday that is, well, 20 hours ago or something, that is perfect for the show tonight. And so a lot of the die-offs were blamed on this so-called blob in the ocean. They call it like a heat blob or something, right? They were quite consistently trying to conflate the mass species die-offs with this blob that just randomly floating around the ocean. This is the radioactive plume from Fukushima is what they're talking about. It covered the whole planet, not just a section of it. And because we do these, I've been a bit slack lately, but we usually do this every month, these types of shows, because we can't keep up with it, right? Because the die-offs now are just so devastating, you're not getting as... excuse me. But here's the real bloblet. It's a radioactive fallout covered the whole planet in 20 days. Right, so the best way to think about it, let me tap it out for 1 minute. The best way to think about Fukushima is the French academic government study. So think of this as a snowstorm coming out of Japan. And after 30 days, this snowstorm covers the whole planet. So currently you're only at, you'll be at day 20 right there. So at 20 days, you got the whole planet covered, and this is cesium-137 at 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. So everything is saturated with this. Every insect, every tree leaf, everything. Every bird, every human, every animal, all the food, all the water, symmetrically worldwide contaminated in 30 days flat. This never went away. This never stopped coming out. So think of it as an invisible snowstorm. It covers the whole planet in 30 days. It starts off in Japan. 30 days later, the whole planet's in the snowstorm. The snow never goes away. It never melts. And it never stops snowing. And then overlay radioactive fallout, and then you're actually being honest. Then you're able to... Then you're actually starting to be honest about what's really going on, right? James has cracked the 5,000 subscribers. We're going to play The Scientists and Their Blob. It's a fantastic, it's a short song. And he got trolled, I noticed, on that video. by pro-nuclear that was hanging on my site for a while we got rid of. And I was saying something like he didn't like this and didn't like AI and didn't like music videos. So what the fuck is he doing on James's video if he doesn't like music videos? James only got 240 plus music videos, anti-nuclear songs on his site. You'll see him in the comments section. You can find links in the description to his site, or link over from his comments. His comments won't show. His comments won't show up for 12 hours because my videos will get 6 seconds longer or so after 12 hours. And we'll come back after and we'll close the poll down. You have a great night. Hugs for everybody. I hope you have a great day tomorrow. You make it this far. Please don't forget to give us a like and share and subscribe. And you can donate in the bottom of the comments section. You'll see 2 ways to donate. And we've been doing that for 14 years. You'll never have an issue. And without your support, we can't continue to do the research. So here's the video. This is a great song. We'll catch you all in the next show. Tomorrow night we'll do part 2. And I keep getting this popping up. I apologize.
The birds washed up, feathers torn, scientists mumble. Eyes are worn, shake their heads, say what went wrong. Check the numbers, drag it along. They write their books, shake their hands, watch it sink into the sand. Call it heat, call it tide, call it anything but the crime. The blob don't burn, the blob don't kill, but the core still burn and the waste still spills. The blob don't kill, the blob don't burn, but the fuel still melts and the tides still turn. The blob don't burn, the blob don't kill, but the fish still starve and the bones lie still. The blob don't kill, the blob don't burn, but the truth stays buried where the dead things fill. 10 years gone, still no sound. Birds don't sing when the food runs out. They print their papers.